I'm John Dennis. I'm running against Nancy Pelosi.
We have the most beautiful state and one of the most beautiful places in the world, and people are leaving.
I'm gonna catch you when all the cameras aren't around, and I'm gonna you up. I'm tired.
He's the chairman of the San Francisco GOP, and he's running against House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Step back, everyone.
All right, welcome to the John Dennis Report here on Tuesday, June 1st, 2021. Oh my God. 2021. All right, June 1st. Boy, I hate to use cliches, but it is really flying. I don't know what's happening. The time is going faster, it seems like. Anyway, really happy to have you here. A lot to cover. I'm only going to cover a couple of topics today because there's a lot to them, and I'm just shocked about some of the things going on, including the Flynn comments, and then an update on Biden and Trump and the whole thing. So anyway, meanwhile here in California, we have a couple of recall efforts going on. I was spending a little time on that today. The recall Gavin Newsom effort is happening, and it has national implications. So if you feel like it doesn't really apply to me, I don't live in California, believe you me, it does, because Gavin Newsom has all sorts of ambition to run for president, and assuming Biden runs again in 24, that would mean that Newsom could potentially run in 24 if Biden doesn't make it. Although he'd have to tangle with an incumbent Kamala Harris, or he could run in 28. But the recall matters because he'd be a formidable, at least on paper, candidate. A lot of candidates candidacies die just as soon as they get off paper. But governor, big state, a lot of fundraising potential. Even at 2028, when he'd run, he'd still be relatively young. I think he'd only be in his early 60s, maybe 62 or 63. So I mean, he'd be in a spot where he could be formidable. But I have to say, the recall effort that has qualified and will happen, and it looks like the vote's gonna come up in the late summer in August. That's effectively killed his chances for the White House. Now, and also it's really put a ding in the armor of the Pelosi machine, because he's certainly part of that. So anyway, on more immediate topics, let's talk about first about General Flynn and his comments in Myanmar. And I had to listen to them a couple of times. Apparently, General Michael Flynn, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, was at an event where he was asked about, could there be a military coup effectively, I would imagine, to reinstall Donald Trump. I mean, that doesn't not said, but it's pretty well understood. And he said, I basically said, sure, why not? Can you find that, by the way, Mario?
Yeah.
Let's listen to it. It's a short clip. It was all over Twitter this morning, and I want to put this out here because, things like that obviously are going to make headlines. And they deserve to, because here you have someone who is, a senior person in the military, lieutenant general, who is a senior person in a Democrat White House under Barack Obama, a senior person in a Republican White House in the Trump administration, effectively saying that he supports a military coup d'état in in the United States. Okay, that's going to get people's attention. Now, don't go to the Washington Post. Let me don't, whatever you do, don't go there. So here, let's just see what's even probably worse. Let's see what CNN says about that. So anyway, people have been talking about it all morning, and as soon as I heard it, I was like, just think for a second. If something is too good to be true, it typically isn't, right? If something sounds too provocative to one side or the other, it typically was taken out of context or wasn't what the person said. And that was my first impression of these comments by Flynn. Apparently there was a coup, there was an election, there were election irregularities. There's some similarities to what people who support Trump believe and they're sort of expressing some wishful thinking that what happened in Myanmar could possibly happen here, where the military would step in and reinstall the appropriately elected president. So, is this up?
It is. It is.
Yeah. Yeah, so they're saying he appears to backplan, but you can even see CNN is hedging its bet here. It says after he appears to backplan in video exchange. So I mean, that's the thing. I mean, people jump on all this stuff, and it gives dopes on the left some fodder to run with on social media. But these things, if you ever hear these things and they sound too good to be true, or they just sound too too one-sided, like it would give joy to one side, they're typically not true, or they're pulled out of context. So, and they actually, I will say in this context, this circumstance, in this instance with General Flynn, it sounded worse than most do when it's pulled out of context, to the extent that even Scott Adams was saying this morning. I listened to him a little bit. He was saying, he was sort of defending Flynn's right to be irrational because of the way he's been treated. To which I say, okay, that's Scott's feeling. It's not my feeling about it. I don't care what happens to you. There's no call for someone to say that we should have a coup d'état, a militarily driven coup d'état. You might want to come up with some other way of dealing with this. But this is with these kinds of circumstances. But there's just no excuse for somebody of his stature and his positions and his rank, frankly, to say anything like that. And this is all tied into something that let's pull this up on Twitter too when you get a chance, Mario. Maggie Haberman from the New York Times saying that Trump expects to be reinstated by August, and I think this event that Michael Flynn was at was that this was there was this buzz going around because there are audits going on in a couple of states, including Arizona, which the local governments have been fighting, the state governments have been fighting, presumably on the pro-Trump side. People are suggesting that the audits are being fought because they're going to come out badly for Biden. And what happens if you have multiple states where audits occur and it shows that Trump actually won those states? What do you do? Right? I mean, so that's kind of like the big question. What do you do? Those are the things that we need to be concerned about. Hold on one second. Let me just type this in so you can see. Berman. Oh, shoot, wrong keyboard. Sorry, folks. Just trying to get this organized. Okay. So, Yeah, and what's interesting too is that Maggie Haberman is with the New York Times, and I don't know this about her. I don't, I have to be honest with you. I try and stay away from the Times and the Post and those outfits. I don't want to give them my eyeball traffic because what they do is just lie, and they're, occasionally I'll jump in just to see what the establishment's deep state narrative is pushing for that day, so that I know what I'm going to have to deal with. But in any event, Trump is saying that he feels like he's going to be reinstalled as president by August. That's what Maggie Haberman is reporting. Now, again, this is the same principle as before. Saying something like that, and Maggie Haberman was saying, I'm not saying this. Here's what you put this up. Yeah, this is it right now. She's saying, I'm not saying this. Other people are saying it. This is what Trump's people are telling me. Blah, blah, blah. Listen, it's the same exact principle. When something so provocative is said like this, that Trump is going to be reinstated by August, there's no mechanism for doing that. Trump knows that. And B, he wouldn't say something like that. Now, listen, he might want to leak something to get some attention that sort of sounds like he's suggesting that he's going to be reinstated. But I suspect if he was asked directly, and if a statement was asked for out of Mar-a-Lago from former President Trump's team, they would say, we do not expect to be reinstated by August. They are masters at manipulating the media into keeping themselves in headlines so that they can keep their causes alive. That's what this sounds like to me. And it's interesting because Maggie Haberman is getting attacked for being a Trump spokesperson, which I find hilarious because she's not a Trump supporter, but she's got to cover him and she has a relationship with him. And, so put it out there. And, and that's her job. I don't understand why the left attacks her for repeating what he says, because they want to be upset at him too. So, but I would just say, do not believe that Flynn said that he supports a coup d'état, and don't believe that Trump is suggesting that he's going to get reinstated by August. They'd have to invent the method to reinstate him. It's a fantastic topic to cover. I think it'll be interesting. I have to tell you, by the way, I'm pessimistic about the outcome of the audits. I don't think they're going to find things that would suggest that an election was improperly decided. But what is an interesting discussion is what happens if the states come back from those audits with evidence that Trump actually won, and yet there's the wrong guys sitting in the White House. What do we do? Will the states recall their certification? I mean, I don't think this is covered anywhere. I don't think there's a mechanism, for recourse, which is an unusual thing in the law. So anyway, we'll see how this plays out. All interesting. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe that what that Flynn said. Don't believe that Trump said what they're saying he said. But let's see what happens with these audits. I don't think they're going to go anywhere, but we'll see how it plays out. Okay, moving on to the current occupant of the White House, which is, by the way, what Nancy Pelosi called Donald Trump. She was so disrespectful. They concocted that whole cockamamie Russia Today story about... seems like a desperate. Yeah, Sarah Brown. By the way, I see your comments. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think Trump said anything like this. It's funny. You mentioned Sidney Powell, Sarah. What's interesting is that I hear Sidney talk now, and she seems kind of reasonable, as if she's kind of toned down. But during the post-November election hype, she seemed a little out of control. And I know some people who were around the Trump team, and they were suggesting that she may have bit off more than she could chew, which incidentally doesn't bode well for her in her case versus Dominion. But she did it. She did an interview with Dinesh D'Souza a month and a half ago, 2 months ago or so, where she seemed very reasonable, and she's still pushing some of these things. She's not pushing some of the other things, but she's definitely pushing what sounds like will be a successful defense for her from that lawsuit. But if she's the one who's agitating here and saying that Trump will be reinstated by August, she really shouldn't be doing that. Anyway, so let's switch back. I wanted to give a little Biden update because last week I got a call. There's a Russian a Russian TV station that they like to reach out to me every once in a while. I don't know if I like that or not. I don't get any benefit out of it, by the way. It's not something. Well, listen, we'll show you here now. There's no there are no Russian donors to my campaign. There are no Russian consultants working on my campaign. There is no Russia district in Russian portion of the congressional district that I'd like to represent. But I don't know. I just have my general idea is to say yes to media, particularly given my position as the local party chairman. Generally speaking, you just want to be available for the media, and that's the case. And they come, and they're very nice. They've always been very nice, and they always ask for a lot of B-roll, which is you just walking around and doing stuff off camera, or not in the interview. So in any event, they brought up this idea of Putin versus Biden. We talked a little bit about it last week. There's going to be a convention a meeting between Putin and Biden in Geneva in 2 weeks, and this was the segment that came out of it. And it just gave me a moment to sort of do an assessment, and I would take some of your input too on this. But when you think about it, I don't speak Russian. I don't know anything about what Putin is saying. I hear allegations against him. I see him being in control of Russia effectively now for like almost 20 years, and he's a sharp guy and probably vicious and very difficult. I'm sorry, I'm getting somebody's going nuts with a tweet texting thread. Someone who I'm going to scream at as soon as I get off this. But in any event, when you think about Putin standing next to Biden, or really the way to think about it is Biden standing next to Putin, it's like kind of laughable. I mean, Biden is a clearly frail guy. Wasn't that sharp in his prime, as I've said many times. And I'm sorry, I gotta block this because they're making me nuts over here. Hold on 1 second. So you think about the prospect of Biden standing next to Putin. I mean, Putin will eat him alive. So anyway, so that's sort of what I was saying in this. We covered actually a number of different topics here in this segment. Actually, let's. People can't hear. If I mute it over here, does that work?
They can hear it. Don't worry.
I'd rather mute it, but anyway. So I did this thing, and it gave me an opportunity to talk about, do an update on the Biden presidency. And I'd like to take your input if you have anything you'd like to share. But I mean, when you think about it, the economy was devastated by COVID, crushed by COVID. We voluntarily shut down the economy effectively, and so you would think that with a lot of pent-up demand and people looking to get back into the flow of things, that we'd have a really robust recovery underway, but that simply is not the case. I mean, we do not have a strong economy. Jobs numbers have come out in the last week. They've been very disappointing. Unemployment is still higher than it should be. We're certainly not in a better position than we were before we went into COVID, and we don't really have that feeling of a robust recovery. Now, that may come, but there are some headwinds into it. First of all, you've got reports of gasoline costs of $6 a gallon in LA, certainly much higher than it was, and I posted the gas prices in San Francisco, which are running at over $4 a gallon, and $4.50 really. And people are like, "Oh, you can't blame it on Biden." Well, yeah, you can. I mean, he shut down the Keystone Pipeline. He sent a terrible message to the energy industry that he's going to shut down the fossil fuel portion of it. We have cities now. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal today about something that we've seen here. San Francisco is banning the use of natural gas in new construction. So if you get an apartment in the future, you're not going to have access to natural gas. You have to go all electric. All these things combined start creating a much more prospective, expensive lifestyle and life for people, and as a result, we have people. We have an economy that just looks incredibly anemic right now. And if you say, "Oh," I've been in the past, I have said, and I've been a proponent of that. The presidents can't really make the economy go, but what they can do is they can do two things. One, they can repeal restrictive legislation and regulations that allow the economy to move forward. They could cut federal spending and in real terms, and leave that money in the productive private sector. And then they can also give people a sense of confidence that they're not going to do anything that's going to harm their businesses. It create what's called regime certainty as opposed to regime uncertainty. That's what presidents can do. And what you have here is you have a Biden administration that's reinstalled or installed or put back into play regulations that were repealed by the Trump administration. You have the threat of much higher taxes, particularly on capital gains, and the impacts that will have on the economy. That creates what is called regime uncertainty. And that's the reason. That's how presidents can affect the economy. Whereas Trump, people gave him a hard time because he was overselling the economy, or saying, "Oh, it's going to be this number. It's almost 4%. It's 3.8, which is almost 4%, which gives people an optimistic feel for the economy." You're not getting that from Biden, and that's to kind of say that does impact things. And so people felt secure that Donald Trump was going to help build a stronger private sector. And to some extent, he did that. And the confidence in the fact that he would do that was what made people confident in, doing investment and building the economy. And I'm afraid you're not getting that from Joe Biden. What you're getting is an anti-business sentiment, which is interesting to me because, all of these corporations, particularly the established enterprise businesses, they are all on board with the whole woke agenda. And yet Joe Biden is effectively harming their businesses by not creating what's known as regime certainty. So there's a problem. There is more racial division than ever before. I mean, Joe Biden effectively said, he said in the last election, "If you don't vote for me, you ain't black." So he supposedly is the guy for black people, and yet racial division is as bad as it's ever been. It's not getting any better. Some repo spike. Yeah, so Sarah Brown makes a great point. Just, I won't get to the specifics, but, there have been, the monetary base has been expanded dramatically. And you can't, her final point is you can't, since 2019, since the repo spike of 2019, and you can't turn the money printer to infinity without inflation. And that's largely true, especially if you have any economic activity. I mean, one of the things that curtailed inflation, I think, in the past is that there wasn't economic activity. I got to say, had Trump stayed in office, I'm pretty sure that his second term would have had inflation as well, because one of the other things that drives inflation, and I'm sure Sarah would agree with this, is the amount of lending that goes on, because banks are inflation machines given our banking system. And if you have robust activity and a demand for money and a demand for loans, when banks are lever up their assets, that's what really causes the big pump in inflation. If you have a subdued economy where there's not as much demand for loans, then even though you can have a higher monetary base created by the Fed, you may not actually see much inflation. But if you combine both of them, an increased monetary base and an increase in loan creation, then watch out, you're definitely getting it. And so the reality is that we're probably seeing inflation that started under Trump and is being continued by the excessive federal government spending under Biden. This ridiculous and absurd $8 trillion budget that he's proposing is certainly going to create some problems. But yeah, inflation is coming in. And here's the funny thing is the party, the Democrats who are constantly focused on supposedly protecting the weak. The inflation tax is murderous to the poor. It so disproportionately hurts the poor. The simple way to think about it is, if inflation occurs and bread goes up, by $1, who does it hurt more? Does it hurt rich people more, or does it hurt poor people? So there's your answer there. But in any event, in terms of switching back to the other point, racial division is at an all-time high. Not only is it at a high, according to polls, but the direction seems wrong. People are displeased about the direction. We have inflation, which we were just talking about, which is coming on in a big way and will hurt poor people, poor minority communities. All poor people really get hit by it hard. You have Middle East tension. We didn't even think about it all through the Bush years, the second Bush years, and the Obama years. Oh, this Middle East, headaches all the time. Donald Trump just wiped that problem off the map. No problems. He just wiped that off the map. And, we are not directly involved, but with what's happening in Israel right now, but we could be very simply, and when that tension happens, it creates a disruption in U.S. economics. It creates, again, a form of regime uncertainty, because we don't know how regime uncertainty is sort of a fancy way of saying, I don't know how to invest if I'm an entrepreneur or someone who manages a business, because I don't know what these nuts are going to do next. That's going to hurt, and if I invest, it could end up hurting my business. So I'm just going to sit tight and wait till I get some clarity about which direction we're moving in the future. And foreign policy can have an impact on that. I mean, if you don't know, if you don't have confidence that your current administration is going to be able to handle foreign policy issues, then it can have an impact on the economy and how people feel about, project how their businesses are going to do in the future. So, the Middle East tension is another thing, and there are a bunch of other things. I mean, I just feel like, every time Joe Biden goes on camera, he's creating a lack of confidence in the American people. They try and shelter him as much as they can, but the truth is he's in a bad place. Let's see what Sarah has to say here. It's asset inflation, but the direct payment section. Yeah, but one of the things, Sarah, is I see what you're saying here. Higher consumer price will hurt those of the fixed kind. Yeah, no, totally. We're on the same page, but don't dismiss the loans, because not all loans are made are collateralized against an asset, and irrespective of what the intended use is. Yes, you'll get asset inflation, but money's fungible and it ends up going elsewhere. The money comes out and it gets, it gets people. Let's say they borrowed against an asset. Well, what are they going to do with that money? They're going to spend it. And if a lot of people are doing that, and we don't have growth in products and services, you're going to end up with inflation. And I'm sure Sarah would agree with me that, the definition of inflation is a little convoluted too. We kind of use a shortcut. Inflation is the increase in the money supply. That's what inflation is. And the consequence of it is higher prices. So I'm sure we're on the same page there. But I agree with her point that an increase in the money supply in and of itself is a dramatic increase, is not a good thing for poor people and for businesses alike, because they have a tough time, predicting what prices are going to be and whether or not they're going to be able to make profits on their businesses, on their products and services. So anyway, I'm gonna leave it at that today. I think we've covered quite a bit. So in the meantime, if you'd be so kind, please go ahead and punch the subscribe button on the John Dennis Report on YouTube. Feel free to follow us at John Dennis Report on Facebook as well. And you can also follow us Real John Dennis on Twitter and Real John Dennis at Instagram. It's been wonderful chatting with you today. I will see you Thursday. Oh, and if you're a golfer, by the way, check out two final notes. If you're a golfer, check out the U.S. Women's Open this week. It's at my club, the Olympic Club here in San Francisco. I think it's going to be a great tournament. Really tough course for the ladies. They better bring their A game. And secondly, if you're in Florida or if you're interested in going to Florida and need an excuse, June 25th through the 27th, the Republican Liberty Caucus, rlc.org, is having its convention in Orlando. The hotel is sold out. They have a sister hotel down the road that's got some rooms available. We still have tickets, and we've got some great folks coming in, including the amazing, fantastic Thomas Massey, Congressman Thomas Massey out of Kentucky, who's our featured speaker. We also have Byron Donald, newly elected African-American Republican from Florida, who's going to be speaking as well. So it's going to be a great event. Tickets are flying. We are blowing out our expectations out of the water right now. So I think there's going to be a lot of energy. It's going to be a terrific event. And if you can join us, feel free to do that. rlc.org, Real John Dennis on Twitter, John Dennis Report on YouTube. We'll see you Thursday. Thanks.